Amen.
All right, man, take it this one. So we celebrated Easter last Sunday, but Patty is still in recovery, has not yet resurrected from the dead. So she's asked me to preach for her this morning. This morning's gospel text usually draws people's attention to Thomas, to doubting Thomas. And he is important in this passage, but I would be bold to say that he is not central. Thomas doubted, but the reality is that all of them doubted. They all doubted Mary's word that she had seen Jesus. And frankly, what Thomas did or didn't do is secondary in this event. Because what is most important in this event is what Jesus did. And the importance of that for those who follow him, including all of us. We hear Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." In fact, Jesus said that 3 times in this passage. And if Jesus repeats himself 3 times, I think you better pay attention. He spoke, "Peace be with you," and then showed them the evidence of his resurrection from the dead. He spoke, "Peace be with you," and then sent them out to continue his ministry empowered by the Holy Spirit. He spoke, "Peace be with you," and offered Thomas the opportunity to touch the proof of his resurrection. So then, what is important with "peace be with you"? Well, I think in order to really understand it, we have to look at the state of the people gathered in the room. Right up front we hear, they are afraid. They are afraid that the people who killed Jesus will come after them. The world has turned against them. And it's pretty clear that their hopes are dashed. The growing popularity of Jesus' ministry, the growing size of the crowds, the grand entry into Jerusalem must have made them feel like they were riding a wave of wondrous things to come. And then all of those hopes disintegrated with Jesus' arrest and torture and execution. What future was there? And then they were probably just angry with each other. They were probably incredibly angry at Judas for betraying Jesus. And if Peter had spilled the beans, they were probably angry at him for denying Jesus, knowing Jesus. Most likely, they were all totally ashamed of themselves because they had all abandoned Jesus, one way or another, when the going got rough. They'd all failed. They'd all sinned. And they all had trouble believing other people's reports of the reality of Jesus' resurrection from the dead. Their hopes had been dashed so no simple verbal witness seemed to be sufficient to shake their doubts. So the people in that room were a mess. And into that room appears Jesus. And he spoke peace to their devastated hearts and minds. He spoke peace to fear and anger and hopelessness. He spoke a peace that comes from seeing that despite all of the negative things happening, God had overcome them all. People killed Jesus, but God raised him from the dead. No matter how bad it gets, God has the last word. There's hope once again. Jesus spoke a peace that comes from realizing that despite all of their failures, God had forgiven them. Peter denied knowing Jesus to save his own neck, but Jesus forgave him. They had all abandoned him. They had all failed in their friendship with him. But Jesus came back and put their troubled hearts at ease. And Jesus spoke a peace that comes from knowing that the Son of God was with them. They were no longer just cowering in the shadows of that locked house. They were now gathered in the presence of God, with the Son of God standing right there in the midst of them. You know, whenever we gather in worship and have communion, we do this peculiar thing. We greet one another with those same words. Peace be with you. Now, I don't think that's meant to be a preview of coffee hour. Though sometimes it kind of looks like it. And I don't think it's meant to be a time of simply catching up with each other. And it's not meant to be just an empty ritual that we do. You see, it's actually a very important ministry that we are all called upon to do for one another. We are called upon to reach out to those we know who are troubled by fear or anxiety, and offer them reassurance that as bad as things might be going, God is with them and has the last word. And if we find ourselves angry with someone else here, blaming them for something, or holding on to some bitterness, Jesus has empowered us by the gift of the Spirit and called us to go to them and forgive them, to make peace with them. And this event is also important because we need to hear that word of peace. I came here this morning deeply troubled. I'm about to leave for a week, and I was really concerned because the plans that I've been putting together so that the student food pantry could operate in my absence. Looked like it was crumbling. And between services, God showed up. And people from this congregation spoke peace to me and solved my problem. And that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be that we care for each other in that way, and that we are Christ's presence to each other. We need to hear, peace be with you, when we're troubled. We need to hear that there's a future for us. We need to hear those words. We need to see those actions from each other that assure us that God is with us and will have the last word. Peace be with you. And we also need to realize that we are called upon and empowered to continue Jesus' ministry. To those who have doubts, we are called to be what people can see and touch that makes the resurrected Jesus real and present to them. People today can't look upon his pierced hands and side. They cannot reach out and touch the wounds he endured for us. But they can see us. They can touch us. There are people we know. There's a world of people out there who need to hear that God is with them. That there is hope. And that God forgives them. So Jesus calls you and sends you to them. Peace be with you.
Peace be with you.